Welcome back to Chasing Squirrels podcast. I'm really thrilled to have the guest that I'm talking with this afternoon for a bunch of reasons. I've said before that setting up conversations for this podcast it's not a linear matter. It really isn't. It's the people that either I feel a cool connection with, or I'm fascinated by their work, or they've reached out to me. Usually from the point that we have that first conversation, it can be a week, 2 weeks. Some of the combos I've had were sort of 3 months in the making. And whatever we're trying to wrestle through, it comes down to scheduling. It comes down to our obligations. And the fantastic thing is when you hit that sweet spot and you finally find the time, you go for it. And I'll say that's a particularly good thing with my guest this afternoon, because she is busy. Emily Fitzpatrick, she's part of the Edtech team. If you look at her resume of stuff, either on the Edtech site or just her from being involved in Edtech keynotes, presentations, conferences, and sessions, she's deep in the tech. She's deep in Google tools. And if you've had, the pleasure of being in one of her sessions, she's an incredible sharer and collaborator. So my context with Emily is that I got to meet her at one of the Edtech summits mid last year. And, I got to sit in on one of her sessions where we talked about Flipgrid and we talked about using Google Slides. So I felt like there was a great conversation to be had here, especially in this case, is that I was fascinated by teachers working with Edtech teams. So that's kind of the leap off point. Emily, what do you think? You throw down a little bit more of an intro for yourself? Over to you.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
In my role right now, I'm the Director for Professional Development at Edtech Team, which is a very long title for I get the opportunity to work with educators, not only just here in Ontario, but also across Canada and across the globe, and really help them find their own potential and their own comfort with integrating technology into the classroom, so that their students can have a deeper understanding of the concepts and be able to apply it outside of those classroom walls. Before I started with Edtech Team, I was in the classroom. I had the honor of teaching at Orangeville District Secondary School, so just north of Toronto. And there I had the chance to teach math, computer science, and English as a second language. And sometimes all of those kind of mixed in as one course too. I've had some experience across the pond over in England. I taught at Cleethorpes Academy over in the UK for a year, where that was my very first teaching assignment by myself. Like, I got my own classroom. It was not just the practicum piece from Teachers College. And that was like a crazy experience, because you were going into it being like, I've got my own classroom. Yes. And then you're like, oh, I have my own classroom. What am I going to do with it?
Exactly.
And then throw in all of the different words between Canadian English and British English, and not really knowing the culture over there. But it was a really neat experience. And I was able to take all of that learning. And then when I had the opportunity to have my own classes, my own courses here in Ontario, leaping from that experience over in the UK and bringing it back here. And then that's kind of when I started getting into this EdTech world. We, at Upper Grand, had the opportunity to work with Google Apps for Education. And it was available right when I first started in the classroom, which was a lot of fun. And the students were really excited to just dive in and give it a go.
It strikes me that the EdTech position is one of those jobs that inside the classroom we say stuff like, we're trying to train you for a job that doesn't exist yet. Like, if I think back in my career in teaching, and I haven't been teaching that long, so I'm in my 13th year, but if I go back, let's say, to my first year teaching, I'm not sure if your job existed. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know if I would have been able to say, now I'll say existed to me. My context could have been blind, could not have overlapped, but I'm not quite sure that if I were talking with students about, let's say, becoming a teacher, that I would have necessarily said, oh, and by the way, one path that's connected with teaching is you could become sort of like an educational consultant for one of the largest information companies in the world, kind of connected that way, like kind of doing Google things. I don't think it kind of existed. Do you ever kind of pause and think about that you have sort of a future job? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it definitely does. And yeah, like even when I started in the classroom or going back to teachers college, I didn't think that these existed, nor did I think that some of the events or some of the opportunities that we have as educators right now even existed. I remember when I first used Twitter as an example in university, and it was like, I'm going out to like the campus bar. And I thought that was how you use Twitter. And then fast forward 3-ish, 4-ish years ago, where at the BIT conference, actually in Niagara, I had the opportunity to be like, oh, this is what Twitter's for. This is how you actually get connected with people. But that wasn't even in my realm. And definitely this job was not something that I could have foreseen when I decided to become a teacher way back when.
I like the concept of, if we play with time traveling for a little bit. So if we go back, I guess if you go back to when the possibility was first presented to you to sort of check out this job, if you think about your on-ramp to that moment, could you have done, I guess it's you talking to yourself X number of years ago, would you have made any suggestions? So would you make any tweaks, or was it just nice and natural transitioning into this position? So if you could go back and talk to yourself just before you're about to consider checking out the Edtech, were you coming in as equipped as you possibly could have been? Or was it kind of like, I'm taking a risk here, I'm going to go for this because I really want it?
Definitely a risk. I started with Edtech team after some of my Twitter PLN, James Peterson and Chris Webb out of Montreal. We had connected online and they're like, hey, you should come present at this conference. And I was like, well, I've been to one of them. And that was like, all of the cool all-stars were there. Like I remember the summit that I actually went to was with Jenny McGarrah, and she keynoted that Ontario summit that year. And I remember sitting there being like, what? You can do that in the classroom with your students? And then when James and Chris were like, no, you got to come up, you got to present, just share what you're doing. I remember sitting there being like, I don't think I'm doing anything cool. Like, I think I'm just kind of making by. And I think that's what I would have told myself, is just continue to take that risk and continue to put yourself out there and collaborate, because the more that you're able to share outward, the more you're able to bring back inward to your classroom.
You know what? That frame of mind is awesome, because, you saying it's the noticing. Do you know what I mean? Like having someone that you respect in your PLN kind of noticing that you're doing a thing. And I've heard time and time again, and sometimes it's in relation to this podcast, I'll approach them like, hey, I'd love to talk to you about some of the work you're doing. And there's inevitably a part of that conversation where it flows to like, I'm kind of surprised that you want to talk about this. It's just kind of what I do. And you start to realize that the individuals that are saying it's just what I do, I've come to find those are the people I want to talk to. The people that just kind of make it kind of plain, like not plain in its energy, but kind of plain, like anybody could kind of do this. Sure, I'll talk about it. What was it like going and doing some of those first talks or keynotes, or basically where you got out of your classroom and you had to start showing what you know?
To be completely honest, my very first one, I tried to kind of forget about. It was not my finest moment. And it was really, I wanted to share what I was doing in my classroom, but I was so caught up with what I was doing in my classroom that I didn't present it in a way that was reachable to that audience. So it was like, I was teaching, I don't know, like advanced math to my like grade 9 students. And they were like, what is going on? But Mark Carbone was in that session along with a couple others, and they came up to me after and they were like, hey, you know what? Those are pretty cool ideas. Keep running with it. And that encouragement was huge. And then I realized that, hey, I don't have to share absolutely everything that I'm doing, because to fit that in kind of a 60-minute session was very, very difficult. And I could break it down to kind of those bite-sized pieces that we always give our students of, hey, this is like my take on Google Forms and formative assessment and how I've used it as exit tickets rather than getting like little crumpled up pieces of paper that I tend to lose all the time.
And yeah, I call it tree management.
Yes, for sure. So I love it.
And yeah, I'm just as addicted to Post-its, and you could say, yeah, but you could take Post-its, and there's a great app now that'll sort of. I'm like, yeah, but it's So the tree management afterwards, doing the feedback.
Yeah, and then like there's no names on it, and you're like, well, this kind of looks like so and so's writing, but it could maybe be this person. Where all of that is now something that we don't have to worry about when we're able to use technology, and we can really focus on connecting with our students and giving them that authentic feedback.
I like that. I like the name drop too. Mark Carbone, he's a great guy. Deep in tech too. I've had some great conversations, even like across the table. I think I've actually had more seeing him in person kind of bits of conversations than, online. And he's definitely a dude that is just kind of calming to talk to. And I would love to get feedback from him. What's the, so when you're doing a session or you're doing one of the summits, and typically, do you find that the feedback in itself, that despite the ease of the digital, being able to sort of share it digitally, are people still coming up and throwing down that feedback like, hey, have you considered, or hey, I got an idea? And it's one of those ironies of doing something that's soaked in technology, because going to these summits, there's a whole lot of talking and a whole lot of face-to-face time. So do you get more feedback face-to-face, or do you find that, it's, I guess, the usable feedback? Where does it become more usable? The stuff that people are coming up, they want to talk about something, or where they finally put it to paper? What are you finding?
I think my biggest opportunity for feedback, especially from people who are in my sessions or utilize some of the resources that I share out, is really when they're like, this is how I see it working in my classroom, where they're able to take kind of that knowledge that I've given them and apply it outside. So kind of looking on our rubrics, you're like level 4, for example, like how do we take what I just shared with you and being able to apply it into their classroom so that they can meet the needs of their students?
I like that. I've had one of the conversations I've had with tech consultants in my school board. I've asked, well, first about what was the translation like, kind of stepping out of the classroom. And I mean, I might wrap it back to that. Like, it's one thing to sort of consider, I'm going to go do this job, but then there's the process of leaving. That's kind of a side thing. What I'm curious about, though, and you've kind of touched on it right now, is being outside of, let's say, a formal school setting. It's that staying connected with the kids and staying connected with the teachers. What are those moments like? What moments are you looking for to sort of see that the stuff that you're presenting and talking about and passionately demonstrating, sitting in your session on the flip grid and using also the slides, the Google Slides, there was stuff that I soaked in because of the positive energy in the session. I think that's a little thing about going to, weekend summits, that the willingness to sort of open stuff up. But for you, where are those moments where that, I'm going to call it a consultancy, but the work that you do is connecting with a school? What are those touch points for you?
I think it's through the relationships that I'm able to make with those teachers, whether it's online and virtually, or whether it's while I'm there face to face, but really getting to sit down and taking that time to be like, okay, what does your class look like? Here's some examples of how I've used this when I was in the classroom, or our opportunities to go back and to work with students. So whether it's in like a community setting through different events, or it's through like a student summit, or it's popping into kind of a local school and being like, hey, can I just hang out and teach some of your classes today? I think we all try to stay connected to the school and to the students so that we can make sure what we're sharing actually makes sense. And then building up those relationships with teachers who are in the classroom and seeing what they're doing and providing kind of a place where that they can bounce ideas back and forth, that they can collaborate, and seeing kind of what sticks.
I like that. I like that sort of getting back into the classroom. I mean, my context, when I think about how I connected with you, I don't remember if there were any students at that particular summit. I know that students are starting to pop up more in the actual summits. Have you noticed that change, happening more vibrantly, or are they, because I've actually noticed, I think there might be a separate student summit coming up sometime soon within Ontario. Is it sort of like a big game plan to sort of be able to have teachers and students at the same EdTech summits? What do you think?
I think Moonshot, that would be awesome, that they could all be learning together and bouncing ideas back and forth, and really that collaboration piece, right? We go into the classroom not always knowing exactly how that lesson's going to be, no matter how well you plan it. And the students are there as not only the people who are going to be learning about it, but also the people that are going to be able to support it and to kind of take it to that next level. We usually have at the summits and at the events student volunteers, and I love when the student volunteers go and pick up their Chromebook or bring their own device, and during the sessions they pop in and they'll sit down beside some of the teachers and learn and play, and I always learn something new when they're there. And then out west and other places, we've also held kind of a student summit. So instead of educators coming in for a day or 2 days, the students come in for a day, and we really work on empowering them on, hey, let's take a look at some of these accessibility tools that can really help you not only right now writing your grade 9 essay, but also what could help you when you get out into the world or when you go to post-secondary, all the way to, hey, let's check out Soundtrap and Pixlr Editor and really start to take our creative skills to that next level.
I love that idea. I like the word moonshot as well. It's one of those things that when I go to weekend conferences or after school conferences, I think about that. I look at the composition of the group and I try and imagine the benefits of having more, not less. So I even kind of go, what would it look like to have parents included as well? I like to build this big community concept of everyone kind of moving simultaneously, but maybe in different directions. I don't know. It's kind of a weird vision that I have, but it makes me also wonder about you as a student. And can you think back on any of the, can you pinpoint any of those mentor moments that kind of have led you to now? What were one or two, maybe one in particular that you think, that was kind of a turning point that got me to either think about teaching or think about moving into the ed tech frame? Could you positively call anyone out?
Of course, I can. It was grade 12 math at Center Wellington District High School. So I live in Fergus, so nice and local. And it was in my math class, and we were taking, I don't even know if I could, advanced the calculus class, which advanced functions, that's what it was called way back when. And my teacher, Miss Chilvers, we had a student who got injured during a hockey practice, got himself a concussion, and he was out for a month and a half. And it was between her and myself who really worked with this student to catch him back up so that he could still pass that course. And it was kind of that moment where she empowered me to go ahead and act as that role model and kind of teach him the course that he had missed with her assistance. And I was kind of like, oh, this is really cool. I think I could do this.
That's cool. That's cool. I like that. I've had other people kind of mention, oh yeah, I was in junior kindergarten. I'm like, whoa, that's, when you talk to adults and they kind of track back, I haven't had as many people jump on high school. Yeah, no,
that one was definitely the one that sticks out. I kind of knew that I wanted to be an educator ever since I was young. My sister and I used to play school with our stuffed animals and the chalkboard. But at that point I was like, no, this math stuff, we got to make sure that we're teaching this.
That is cool. What's, so if we're flashing forward, moonshotting or just touching a bit of the future, what's coming down the pipe for you that's sending the nerves on edge, giving you that little sort of like a little bit of an itchy sweater? Oh, that's kind of exciting, not sure. What's coming down the pipe that you feel like is kind of cool and exciting?
It's a really good question. I think bigger picture kind of for education in Canada in general, it's reaching those communities that aren't connected yet. Like I can think, like if I look at my PLN on Twitter, I have tons of people from Southern Ontario, and I have tons of people from Vancouver and Victoria, and I have tons of people from like Thunder Bay area or Windsor area. But there's so much more of Canada where education is that they're not necessarily on social media or have that connectivity or knowledge sometimes about the collaboration that exists. That I think my thing that gets me really excited, but then also nervous because it's like a really big country, is being able to see all of those educators connected so that we can not only just use our knowledge, but we can use their knowledge and connect with their experiences.
I totally get that. I've often looked at my PLN and I'm more and more looking for the blind spots, as in who don't I have in there? Like what conversations am I missing out on? And I totally get that scaling issue, because then all of a sudden, you know, if you spend a week adding 10 people a day, like all of a sudden, like that becomes a really big picture to exist in. And you're right. I've had conversations on here with individuals that aren't on. Those are actually really almost, they're interesting conversations to have, the people that I approach that aren't on social media, because they really start from a place of, how did you notice? How did you, you know, like you just go to a conference and you meet someone face to face. They have an email address and you say, hey, would you like to, you know, follow up and do some collaboration? It's an interesting place, because sometimes it's not that easy to make those connections.
No, and they have, like, everybody's got a story and everybody's got an opportunity or some really cool ideas. And if we're able to kind of utilize all of that and bring them to that conversation as well, whether it is face-to-face or on social media, I think it'll just add benefit to everybody else. I have no idea on how to go about that, but that would be really cool.
Well, therein lies the moonshot, right?
Exactly.
We're gonna get it. We're gonna see where we go. I love that leap to the final question I'll ask you. So if people are going to want to get back in touch with you, connect with you, chat with you, share with you, where would you like to be found?
So I can be found on Twitter at efits_edtech, because there's a gazillion people out in the world with the name Emily Fitzpatrick. Or you can reach me through email at emily@edtechteam.com.
Fantastic. I'll say for me, it's interesting. Lots of e-fitses, but I realize what a visual learner I am, because when I think recently, when individuals change their profile picture, that's what rattles me. I'm like, is it still the same person that I'm reaching out to? And I think, no, seriously, yeah. And it's funny, I don't think of it from the inside out, because I change mine every once in a while.
Yeah.
But that was the thing when I was in early communications with you. I'm like, that profile picture, it's different. Is that the person? And I'm questioning my own sort of like rational mind.
No, and it's so true, especially like on Twitter being like such small profile, like picture heads, especially when you're talking back and forth. Mm-hmm. It's also kind of the same way when you meet somebody for the first time and you're like, ooh, I'm pretty sure that's that person. But like their picture's too tiny to actually figure out if that's the person.
Almost like you want to carry a piece of cardstock with a little circle on it and hold it up so you can look at their face at a distance and like, I think it looks like them. Yeah.
Exactly. Or have like this little tag of like, this is my Twitter handle. Because that's how I know quite a few of my PLN. I'm just like, you're like.
That's a thing. Reenact. There you go. Do it at the next EdTech thing. Reenact your Twitter profile picture.
I love it. With your hash or with your handle somewhere.
Yeah. So you try and, you can have out all the stock dressing hats and, bolas and all that, but see if you can reenact your picture, that could be challenging for some people, especially, depending on what they have there.
Yeah, especially if they're like up on a mountain somewhere.
I know. Eh? Well, hey, pantomime, you get whatever. Emily, I appreciate your time. Thanks for spending, cutting out your day and having a convo. This was fantastic. I love that I got more of your story, and I appreciate you being able to being able to schedule the time with you. I really do.
Hey, well, thank you so much for having me on. I really, I'm honored to be here, and I love the conversation that we just had, and I can't wait to see hear the other conversations that you get to have.
Cool. Thanks. I appreciate it. Well, enjoy the rest of your week. And definitely enjoy. We have a little bit of spring. Do you have any spring-like weather, or is it freezing over again?
Well, it stopped snowing, and it's not freezing rain. So maybe spring-like weather?
Typical Ontario January then.
Right? All 4 seasons, all combined into 24 hours.
No complaining on my end. No complaining. All right, digital high five to you. I'm sure I'll see you in the Twitter hallways. And once again, thank you for chatting with me.
Hey, no problem. Have a great one.
You too. Take care. Thanks for listening to Chasing Squirrels podcast. You can find other episodes on iTunes and on Podbean. You ever want to connect with me? You can reach me on Twitter @ChrisJClough, or you can reach out to me, chrisjclough@gmail.com.